I arrived 2 days early at the family cabin for our annual celebration. My husband, who had been there for a week, seemed shocked to see me. That night, I saw him burning a box behind the cabin. After he left, I raked through the ashes and recognized the remains that hadn't burned. I screamed in horror. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled up to the cabin 2 days earlier than planned. At 63, I'd learned to trust my instincts, and something had been nagging at me all week, a persistent unease I couldn't shake. The October air carried the scent of pine and dying leaves, familiar smells that should have brought comfort, but instead heightened my anxiety. Richard's truck sat in the driveway, dust-covered from the dirt road. He'd been here since last Monday, preparing for our annual family gathering. For 35 years, we'd hosted our children and grandchildren at this Montana cabin every autumn. It was tradition, sacred, unchangeable tradition. But this year felt different. I grabbed my overnight bag and climbed the porch steps, noting the disarray, tools scattered across the railing, muddy boots by the door. Richard was meticulous about order. This chaos was unlike him. "Richard?" I called, pushing open the door. The main room was dark, curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. Dishes cluttered the kitchen counter. A half-empty whiskey bottle sat on the coffee table beside scattered papers. My husband emerged from the bedroom, his face draining of color when he saw me. "Helen." He froze in the doorway. "What are you doing here?" "Hello to you too." I set down my bag, studying his expression. Fear flickered across his features before he masked it with confusion. "I decided to come early. Help you prepare. You said Thursday." His voice was tight, controlled. "I said I'd try for Thursday. Today's Tuesday. I wanted to surprise you." I moved toward the kitchen, but he stepped into my path. "You should have called." 35 years of marriage had taught me to read the subtle shifts in his demeanor. The way his jaw clenched, the defensive set of his shoulders, the slight tremor in his hands. "Since when do I need permission to come to our own cabin?" I kept my tone light, though my heartbeat quickened. He rubbed his face, exhaustion evident in every line. "You're right, sorry. I've just been working hard. The place is a mess." "I can see that." I gestured at the chaos. "Are you feeling all right? You look terrible." "Just tired. Lot to do before everyone arrives." He moved to the kitchen, gathering dirty plates with jerky, distracted movements. "How was the drive?" "Fine. Empty roads." I watched him closely. "Richard, what's going on?" "Nothing." Why would anything be going on? That response, defensive, sharp, confirmed my suspicions. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. We spent the afternoon in careful politeness, dancing around each other like strangers. Richard kept disappearing outside, muttering about repairs and preparations. I unpacked, made dinner, and tried to ignore the knot of dread tightening in my stomach. As darkness fell, I decided to take a bath, hoping the hot water might ease my tension. But as I soaked in the old clawfoot tub, I heard the back door creak open and close. Through the small bathroom window, I glimpsed Richard crossing the yard toward the tree line, carrying something bulky, a box. I climbed out quickly, threw on my robe, and moved to the bedroom window for a better view. The moon was bright enough to illuminate the clearing behind the cabin. Richard knelt beside the old fire pit we'd used for s'mores with the grandchildren, the box beside him. He was building a fire. My breath caught as flames began to lick upward, orange light dancing across his face. He looked around, furtive, guilty, then opened the box and began feeding its contents into the fire. Papers, it looked like. Documents. Photographs, perhaps. I should have gone out there, demanded to know what he was doing, but something held me back, an instinct that told me to wait, to watch, to gather information before confronting him. For 20 minutes, I stood at that window, watching my husband systematically destroy whatever that box contained. His movements were methodical, purposeful. He used a long stick to push items deeper into the flames, ensuring complete incineration. Finally, he stood, brushed off his knees, and headed back toward the cabin. I hurried to bed, pulling the covers up and closing my eyes just as I heard him enter. He slipped into bed beside me, his breathing eventually evening out into sleep. But I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, questions racing through my mind. What had he burned? Why the secrecy? What was he hiding? At dawn, I rose quietly, dressed, and slipped outside. The morning air was cold enough to see my breath. I crossed the dewy grass to the fire pit, my heart hammering. The ashes were still warm. I found a rake in the shed and began carefully sifting through the remains, my hands trembling. Most of it was thoroughly destroyed, blackened fragments that disintegrated at the slightest touch. But fire is imperfect. It always leaves evidence. In the gray ash, something caught the early light. I bent closer, using a stick to push aside the debris. A corner of a photograph, singed but partially intact. I picked it up carefully, brushing away the soot. My breath stopped. It was a picture of Richard, younger, maybe 20 years ago, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. His arm was around her shoulders. They stood in front of a house I'd never seen, both smiling at the camera with the easy intimacy of people who knew each other well. Very well. My hands shook as I continued searching. Another fragment revealed what looked like a letter, the handwriting feminine and flowing. Only a few words remained legible. Can't keep doing this. The children deserve children. The word echoed in my mind like a gunshot. I found more pieces, scraps of documents with official-looking letterheads, though the text was too damaged to read. A corner of what might have been a birth certificate, the edge of a legal document with a notary seal. And then I found it, partially buried in the ash, protected by the metal fire grate it had fallen through, was a small plastic card, a driver's license, warped and melted, but still partially legible. The photo showed a young woman, perhaps in her 20s. Dark hair, serious eyes. The name was mostly obscured, but I could make out part of the address. Billings, Montana. We lived outside Missoula. Billings was 3 hours away, but it was the date of birth that made my blood run cold. If this license was current, this woman was 28 years old. 28. My mind did the math automatically, unwillingly. 28 years ago, Richard and I had been married for 7 years. Our son Kenneth was 5. Our daughter Caroline was 3. We'd been living in Seattle, where Richard worked for an engineering firm that sent him on frequent business trips to Montana. He'd been scouting locations for a potential expansion, he'd said. 2 or 3 trips a month, sometimes for a week at a time. I'd stayed home with the children, trusting him completely, never questioning his absences. The scream built in my chest slowly, rising from some deep, primal place. When it finally tore from my throat, it shattered the morning silence. Raw, agonized, the sound of 35 years of trust shattering like glass. Birds exploded from the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a dog began barking, and behind me, I heard the cabin door slam open. "Helen!" Richard's voice carried panic, guilt, and something else. Fear. I turned slowly, the melted driver's license still clutched in my hand, ash smudging my fingers like evidence of some dark ritual. Our eyes met across the clearing, and in that moment, I saw the truth written on his face as clearly as words on a page. This wasn't just an affair. This was a secret that had roots, branches, a whole hidden life growing in the shadows of our marriage. And now, standing in the ashes of his attempted cover-up, I was going to unearth every last bit of it. Who is she? My voice was eerily calm, detached. The scream had purged something, leaving behind a cold, crystalline clarity. Richard descended the porch steps slowly, hands raised as if approaching a wild animal. "Helen, please, let me explain. Who is she?" He stopped 10 feet away, his face crumbling. "It's complicated. Then start explaining, because right now, I'm standing in a pile of ashes that you clearly didn't want me to find, holding a driver's license of a woman young enough to be our daughter." I held up the melted plastic. "So, unless you want me to walk out of here right now and never look back, you'd better start talking. And Richard?" He waited, throat working. "Don't you dare lie to me again." The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the clearing. Somewhere nearby, a raven called out, harsh, mocking. Richard's mouth opened, closed, opened again, and in the silence before he spoke, I understood that whatever came next would either destroy our marriage or reveal it had been an illusion all along. Her name, he finally whispered, is Carol Whitmore. The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it, with such familiarity, such weight, told me everything I needed to know. This story was far from over. It had only just begun. Carol Whitmore was someone I knew a long time ago. Richard's voice was barely audible over the morning wind rustling through the pines. Before we moved back to Montana, when I was traveling for work. That's not an explanation. I kept the melted license clutched in my fist, evidence he couldn't explain away. That's a dodge. Try again. He looked toward the cabin, as if hoping for an escape route. Can we go inside? Please? No. Right here. Right now. Who is she? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, he exhaled, a long, defeated sound. She was someone I was involved with during those business trips to Montana. An affair. The word tasted bitter. Yes. He couldn't meet my eyes. For how long? Does it matter? How long? 2 years? Maybe 3. He ran his hand through his thinning hair. It ended before we moved here permanently. I broke it off, Helen. I chose our family. I laughed, a harsh, broken sound. How generous of you. And the woman in the photograph? Was that her? Yes. And these children that deserve something? The ones mentioned in the letter you tried to burn? His face went pale. You read that? What was left of it? Answer the question, Richard. He turned away, shoulders sagging. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear him. She had a daughter. Carol did. The world tilted. I grabbed the edge of the fire pit to steady myself. Your daughter? I don't know. She said she was mine, but I was never sure. I never took a test. You never took a test. I repeated the words slowly, trying to comprehend such cowardice. For 28 years, there's been a woman, possibly your daughter, walking around, and you never bothered to find out. What good would it have done? I was married. I had a family. A test would have only complicated everything. Complicated. The rage building inside me was white hot. Precise. You mean it would have forced you to take responsibility? Helen, please. Why were you burning this now? After all these years, why destroy the evidence? He turned back, and I saw something new in his expression. Not just guilt. Fear. Real, palpable fear. Because Carol's been calling me for the past 3 months. She's sick. Cancer. She doesn't have much time, and she wants me to meet her daughter, to acknowledge her. She's threatening to come here, to the cabin, during our family gathering, to tell everyone. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. So, you were trying to erase her, burn away the evidence before she could expose you. I was trying to protect our family. Our family? I stepped toward him, ash smudging my clothes. Richard, you don't get to destroy evidence of another human being and call it protection. If this woman is your daughter, she deserves to know. She deserves nothing from me. The words exploded from him, raw and desperate. I gave her mother money. For years, I sent checks. I did my part. Buying her silence is not the same as being a father. I was a father. To Kenneth and Caroline. That's where my responsibility lay. I stared at this man I'd shared 3.5 decades with, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Get out. What? Get out of this cabin. Now. I need to think. Helen, we can work through this. Now! He flinched at the steel in my voice. After a moment's hesitation, he walked past me toward his truck, not even stopping to grab his things from inside. The engine roared to life, and gravel sprayed as he peeled out of the driveway. I stood in the clearing until the sound of his truck faded completely, then made my way back inside on trembling legs. I locked the door behind me, a meaningless gesture, but it made me feel less vulnerable. My phone buzzed. A text from our daughter Caroline. Mom, you there yet? Kenneth and I need to talk to you before Thursday. Important. Perfect timing. I ignored it. Instead, I returned to the ashes, this time with plastic bags and latex gloves from the cleaning supplies. I documented everything with my phone camera, then carefully collected every fragment I could find. If Richard thought burning the evidence would end this, he was wrong. I brought my findings inside and spread them across the kitchen table. Under bright light, I examined each piece methodically, my years as a paralegal before the children were born resurfacing like muscle memory. The letter fragments were nearly useless, but I managed to extract a few more words. 28 years of silence. Deserves to know her father. My time is limited. A death sentence, written in ash. I photographed everything, uploaded the images to my secure cloud storage, and then began searching online. Carol Whitmore, Billings, Montana. The internet held no shortage of information for those who knew where to look. Within an hour, I'd found her. Carol Whitmore, age 56, listed on a patient profile page for a breast cancer support group. The photo showed a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, her smile tired but genuine. The page mentioned her daughter, Emily Whitmore, but provided no photo or additional information. Emily. Richard's possible daughter had a name. My phone rang. Caroline. I let it go to voicemail, but she called back immediately. Then Kenneth called. Then Caroline again. Finally, I answered. What is it? Mom? Thank goodness. Where's Dad? He's not answering his phone. He's not here. I kept my voice neutral. What do you mean he's not there? He's supposed to be preparing the cabin. He left. We had a disagreement. A pause. About what? That's between your father and me. Mom, this is important. Kenneth and I are driving up tonight instead of Thursday. We need to talk to you both. Ice formed in my stomach. About what? About the cabin and other things. We'll explain when we get there. But we need both you and Dad present. Caroline, what's going on? We'll be there by dinner. Please make sure Dad comes back. She hung up before I could protest. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by evidence of Richard's betrayal, and tried to understand what new crisis was descending on us. The cabin? What about it? My laptop was still in my car. I retrieved it and began digging through our financial records, something I'd neglected in recent years, trusting Richard to manage our accounts as he always had. What I found made my blood run cold. Withdrawals, large ones. Starting about a year ago, regular payments of $5,000, taken from our joint savings account every month. 12 payments so far, totaling $60,000. The memo line simply read, Property Management. We didn't own any rental properties. I cross-referenced the routing number. The payments went to an account at a Billings bank. My hands shook as I dug deeper, hacking into Richard's email using a password he'd used for years, too arrogant or careless to change it. There, buried in a subfolder labeled Receipts, I found correspondence with a facility called Peaceful Meadows Care Center. Invoices for extended care services, for one Carol Whitmore, $5,000 per month. Richard hadn't been sending money to buy silence. He'd been paying for her cancer treatment. The revelation shifted something inside me. Not forgiveness. I was too angry for that. But a recognition that this story was more complex than simple betrayal. Richard had been supporting Carol through her illness, even as he tried to erase evidence of her existence. But why hide it? Why lie? Unless... My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Morella, this is Emily Whitmore. I got your number from my mother's address book. She told me she's been trying to reach your husband. I think it's time we met. I'll be at the Evergreen Diner in Missoula tomorrow at noon. Please come alone. My heart hammered against my ribs. This woman, this possible stepdaughter, knew my name, had my number, was demanding a meeting. How long had she been planning this? Another text arrived, this one from Richard. Helen, please answer. Caroline called me. Said they're coming tonight. I'm at the motel in town. We need to present a united front. Whatever you think of me, don't let this destroy our family. The audacity of it stunned me. After 35 years of deception, he wanted me to play the supportive wife for the sake of appearances. I was about to respond when headlights swept across the windows. My watch read 3:30. Caroline and Kenneth weren't supposed to arrive until evening. Car doors slammed. Voices, urgent, argumentative. I moved to the window and peered out. Caroline and Kenneth stood in the driveway, but they weren't alone. A woman in a business suit accompanied them carrying a briefcase. Behind them, a sheriff's vehicle pulled up, lights off but unmistakably official. My breath caught. This wasn't a family discussion. This was an intervention. Or worse, an investigation. Caroline spotted me in the window and her expression hardened. She said something to Kenneth, who nodded grimly. Then all three approached the cabin, Caroline, Kenneth, and the woman in the suit. I opened the door before they could knock, blocking the entrance. "What's going on?" "Mom." Caroline's voice was cold. Stranger's voice. "We need to come inside. Now. Not until you tell me what this is about." The woman in the suit stepped forward, producing identification. "Mrs. Morella, I'm Linda Hayes, an attorney representing your children's interests. There are some serious concerns regarding your husband's financial management and your own cognitive capacity to make decisions. May we come in?" Cognitive capacity. The words hit like a slap. "You think I'm senile?" I looked at my children, betrayal burning through me. "You came here to declare me incompetent?" "Mom, it's not like that," Kenneth began. "Then what is it like?" Linda Hayes's expression was professionally sympathetic. "Mrs. Morella, your children are concerned about irregularities in your family finances, unexplained absences by your husband, and your own recent erratic behavior." "Erratic? You came here 2 days early, unannounced," Caroline interjected. "That's not like you. And Dad called me this morning, said you kicked him out over nothing, that you were acting paranoid, irrational. He called you." The betrayal within the betrayal took my breath away. "He's already building a case against me." "That's not," Caroline faltered. "We're worried, Mom. Both of us. About you, about Dad, about what's happening to this family." "And the cabin?" I asked, remembering Caroline's earlier comment. "What about the cabin?" Kenneth shifted uncomfortably. "There are some financial issues, tax liens, potential foreclosure. We've been trying to reach you and Dad for weeks, but you never returned our calls." Because I'd been too focused on my own life, my book club, my volunteer work, too trusting that Richard had everything under control. The sheriff's deputy approached now, an older man with kind eyes. "Ma'am, I'm Deputy Morrison. I'm just here as a courtesy, to make sure everyone stays calm. Are you all right?" "Am I all right?" I laughed, a brittle, dangerous sound. "My husband has been lying to me for 35 years. My children think I'm losing my mind. There's a stranger claiming to be my stepdaughter who wants to meet me tomorrow. And apparently our family cabin, the one place I thought was stable, is being foreclosed on. So no, Deputy Morrison, I am not all right." Silence fell over the group. Caroline and Kenneth exchanged glances. "What stranger?" Caroline asked slowly. "What stepdaughter?" I smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Come inside, all of you, because if we're going to air our family's dirty secrets, we might as well be thorough about it." I stepped aside, allowing them to enter. As they filed past me into the cabin, my children, their lawyer, the deputy, I caught sight of the evidence still spread across the kitchen table, and I realized that this confrontation, this crisis, might actually be the leverage I needed. They wanted to question my competence? Fine. But first, they were going to hear the truth about Richard Morella. Every last sordid detail. They gathered around the kitchen table like mourners at a wake, staring at the ash-stained fragments I'd laid out like evidence in a courtroom. Caroline's face had gone pale. Kenneth looked sick. Linda Hayes examined each piece with the clinical detachment of someone paid to remain objective. Deputy Morrison stood near the door, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "Mom," Caroline whispered, picking up the partially melted driver's license. "What is this?" "That," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, "is what your father was burning behind the cabin this morning at dawn. That, and approximately 24 other documents, photographs, and letters he thought he could erase." "I don't understand." Kenneth reached for one of the photograph fragments. "Who is Carol Whitmore?" I pulled out my phone, brought up the memorial page, and set it in the center of the table. That's Carol Whitmore. She's 56 years old. She has stage 4 breast cancer. And according to your father, she's the woman he had an affair with for 2 to 3 years while we lived in Seattle. While you, Caroline, were 3 to 5 years old. While you, Kenneth, were 5 to 7. The silence that followed was suffocating. An affair, Caroline repeated flatly. Not just an affair. She had a daughter, Emily, who is now 28 years old. I let that sink in. Your father has probably had another child living in Montana for nearly 3 decades. A child he's never acknowledged, never met, never claimed. Kenneth sank into a chair. That's not possible. Dad wouldn't he? I interrupted. Then explain these. I pulled up the bank statements on my laptop, turning the screen so they could see. $60,000 withdrawn from our joint savings over the past year. $5,000 a month sent to Peaceful Meadows Care Center in Billings. For Carol's cancer treatment. Linda Hayes leaned forward, her professional mask slipping slightly. May I? I handed her the laptop. She scrolled through the statements, her lips pressing into a thin line. These withdrawals are significant. Mrs. Morella, were you aware of these transactions? I found them today. 2 hours ago, to be exact. Right after I discovered what my husband was trying to destroy. Mom. Caroline's voice broke. Why didn't you call us? Why didn't you... Call you? I laughed bitterly. And tell you what? That I just discovered your father has been systematically lying to me for 35 years? That he's been draining our savings to pay for another woman's medical care while telling me we needed to be careful with money? That he tried to burn the evidence of his betrayal the moment I arrived early? But you should have... Kenneth began. Should have what? Waited for you to arrive with your lawyer to declare me incompetent? That's why you're here, isn't it? Your father called you, spun some story about my erratic behavior, and you came running with legal intervention papers. That's not fair, Caroline protested, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. Deputy Morrison cleared his throat. Mrs. Morella, for the record, no one has filed any competency papers. Your children requested I accompany them as a precautionary measure. Given some concerning phone calls from your husband. Concerning how? The deputy shifted uncomfortably. He suggested you might be having some kind of episode. Memory issues. Confusion. He was worried about your safety. The manipulation was breathtaking. Richard had not only tried to destroy evidence, he'd preemptively attacked my credibility. My memory is perfect, I said coldly. Would you like me to recite our bank account numbers, our anniversary date, the names and birthdays of all my grandchildren? Or perhaps you'd prefer I explain the legal process for establishing paternity in Montana, which I researched this afternoon. Linda Hayes set down the laptop. Mrs. Morella, I think we need to slow down and... My phone buzzed. A text from Richard. Helen, whatever you're telling them, remember they're our children. Don't destroy this family out of spite. I held up the phone so everyone could see. Your father thinks I'm acting out of spite, that I'm the one destroying this family. Caroline reached for the phone, read the message, and something in her expression shifted. Not quite belief, but doubt. Doubt in the narrative Richard had fed her. There's more, I said, opening Richard's email on my laptop. I have access to your father's correspondence. Would you like to read the emails between him and Carol? The ones where she begs him to meet Emily before she dies? The ones where he refuses over and over because it's too complicated? Mom, stop. Kenneth's voice was strained. Just stop. We need Dad here. We need to hear his side. His side? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. I gave him the chance to explain this morning. He admitted everything. The affair. The possible child. The money. And then, instead of facing the consequences like an adult, he called you to paint me as unstable. He's not interested in truth, Kenneth. He's interested in control. But there has to be an explanation. Caroline started. There is. He's a coward. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Deputy Morrison shifted his weight, glancing at his watch. Linda Hayes closed her briefcase with a decisive snap. Mrs. Morella, the attorney said carefully, I think it's clear that there are significant marital issues that need to be addressed. However, the immediate concern, The reason your children contacted me is the financial situation. The cabin is indeed facing foreclosure. There are tax liens totaling nearly $40,000. And there are some other complications. What complications? Kenneth and Caroline exchanged glances. Kenneth nodded, giving his sister permission to speak. Caroline took a deep breath. Dad took out a second mortgage on the cabin 18 months ago. We only found out last month when the bank contacted us. Apparently, he'd listed us as co-signers without our knowledge. The betrayal kept layering, each revelation worse than the last. He forged your signatures? We think so. The bank is investigating. But in the meantime, the cabin is security for a $150,000 loan that's in default. $150,000. I felt the room tilt. Where did that money go? We don't know. We've been trying to reach you both for weeks to figure it out. The bank statements show it was withdrawn in cash, in increments, over the course of 6 months. My mind raced through possibilities. The cancer treatment payments accounted for $60,000, but $90,000 more. What had Richard needed nearly $250,000 for? There's something else, Kenneth said quietly. The lawyer handling the foreclosure contacted us yesterday. He said there's another party interested in the cabin, someone who's offered to pay off the liens and the mortgage in exchange for the deed. Who? Someone named Whitmore. Emily Whitmore. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. Richard's daughter wants to take our cabin? If she is his daughter, Linda Hayes corrected. That hasn't been established. She's been in contact with Dad, Caroline said. We found emails. She's been negotiating with him, offering to resolve the financial issues in exchange for acknowledgement. And the cabin. The pieces assembled themselves with horrifying clarity. Richard hadn't just been paying for Carol's treatment. He'd been negotiating with Emily, promising her something. Acknowledgement, inheritance, legitimacy, in exchange for saving him from financial ruin. And he'd been using our family's legacy as currency. When? My voice was barely a whisper. When did this negotiation start? Kenneth pulled out his phone, scrolled through screenshots. Based on the emails we found, about 3 months ago. Right when Carol's cancer became terminal. 3 months. The same time Richard had started burning through our savings. The same time he'd stopped sleeping well, had become distant and irritable. He's been planning to give her the cabin, I said slowly. Our cabin. The place where we've celebrated every holiday for 20 years. Where our grandchildren learned to fish. Where we scattered your grandmother's ashes. We don't know that for sure, Caroline began. Yes, we do. I pulled up another email chain. One I'd found buried deep in Richard's deleted folder. Read this. Caroline leaned over the laptop, Kenneth reading over her shoulder. I watched their faces as they absorbed the words I'd discovered an hour before they arrived. Carol, I'll give Emily what she wants. The cabin is worth more than the liens. She can have it. Clear title. In exchange for her silence and your promise to never contact my family. Helen never needs to know. I'll tell her we lost it to foreclosure. She'll be upset, but she'll get over it. This is the only way to protect everyone. Our Caroline's hand flew to her mouth. Kenneth's face flushed with anger. He was going to steal our inheritance, Kenneth said. Give it to a stranger. Not a stranger, I corrected. His daughter. The one he abandoned. The one he's trying to buy off now that it's convenient. Linda Hayes had gone very still. Mrs. Morella, if your husband was planning to transfer property without your consent, given it's jointly owned, that's potentially fraud. And if he forged your children's signatures on loan documents, that's definitely fraud. Which means, Caroline asked, which means your mother has grounds for immediate legal action, and your father may be facing criminal charges. The deputy stepped forward. Ma'am, I need to ask, do you feel safe here? Is there any reason to believe your husband might become volatile, or— Richard isn't violent, I said. He's just desperate. And desperate people make terrible decisions. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Richard. I let it ring through to voicemail, then played the message on speaker. Helen, please. The kids are being dramatic. Yes, there are financial problems. Yes, I should have told you. But I was trying to fix everything before you found out. The Emily situation, it's complicated, but it's under control. Just come to the motel. Let's talk this through like adults. Before this gets out of hand. Before this gets out of hand. As if it wasn't already spiraling completely beyond his control. Call him back, Linda Hayes advised. But do it carefully. Don't let him know we're all here. Tell him you're willing to meet. We need to understand the full scope of what he's done before we take action. I looked at my children. Caroline had tears streaming down her face. Kenneth looked like he wanted to put his fist through the wall. Mom? Caroline said, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. We should have believed you. We should have listened instead of assuming. You assumed I was the problem because that's what he wanted you to assume. I kept my voice gentle despite the anger churning inside me. He's been manipulating all of us for decades. He's just gotten better at it over time. Kenneth stood abruptly, pacing to the window. I want to talk to him. I want to hear him explain how he thought any of this was acceptable. Not yet, I said. If we confront him now, he'll run. Or worse, he'll destroy more evidence. We need to be smart about this. Your mother's right, Deputy Morrison added. If there's fraud involved, you need to build a case. Document everything. Get copies of all financial records, emails, correspondence. Then you take it to the county prosecutor. And what about Emily Whitmore? Caroline asked. She's supposed to meet Mom tomorrow at noon. What do we do about that? I met my daughter's eyes. I'm going to that meeting, because unlike your father, I'm not going to pretend this woman doesn't exist. If she's his daughter, she deserves answers. Truth. Something she's apparently never gotten from him. You can't go alone, Kenneth protested. I won't. You're both coming with me. I looked at Linda Hayes. And I'd like you there too, as witness to whatever she has to say. The attorney nodded slowly. I can do that. My phone buzzed with a text from the unknown number. Emily, I know your children are there. I've been watching the cabin. Bring them tomorrow. They should hear this too. Ice slid down my spine. She's been watching the cabin. Deputy Morrison was at the window immediately, scanning the tree line. I don't see anyone. She's smart, I said. Smarter than your father gave her credit for. Another text. Don't bother looking. I'm gone. But tell your husband I'm done waiting. If he doesn't meet with me by tomorrow, I'm taking everything I know to the press. Every email, every canceled check, every lie. Tomorrow at noon, Mrs. Morella. All of us. The truth ends the silence. I showed the text to the others. Caroline looked terrified. Kenneth looked furious. Linda Hayes looked calculating. This is escalating quickly, the attorney said. We need to control the narrative before it controls us. Agreed. I stood, gathering the evidence from the table with steady hands. Tonight, we document everything. Tomorrow, we hear what Emily has to say. And then we decide how to handle Richard. And the cabin? Kenneth asked. What about the foreclosure? We fight it. Every step. This is our family's legacy, and I'll be damned if I let Richard gamble it away to ease his guilty conscience. Deputy Morrison headed for the door. I'll be nearby tonight, patrolling the area. If you need anything at all, you call. After he left, the four of us sat in the growing darkness, the weight of secrets and betrayals pressing down like a physical force. Mom? Caroline's voice was small. What if Emily is his daughter? What if she's our sister? The question hung in the air, unanswered and unanswerable. What if, indeed? Because if Emily Whitmore was Richard's daughter, then everything, our entire family structure, our history, our identity, had been built on a foundation of lies. And tomorrow, at noon, that foundation was going to crack wide open. We worked through the night like investigators assembling a murder case. Caroline took charge of the financial documents, creating spreadsheets that tracked every suspicious transaction. Kenneth went through Richard's emails systematically, building a timeline of his communications with both Carol and Emily. Linda Hayes reviewed everything with legal precision, marking items that could serve as evidence. I sat at the center of it all, the eye of the hurricane, my paralegal training returning as if I'd never left the profession. It was 3 a.m. when Caroline found the offshore account. Mom. Her voice was tight. You need to see this. The laptop screen showed a bank in the Cayman Islands. An account in Richard's name, opened 14 months ago. Current balance, $237,000. I stared at the numbers, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. That's impossible. Where would he get that kind of money? Kenneth leaned over, scrolling through the transaction history. Look at the deposits. They're all from the same source, R&P Engineering Consultants. Richard's firm? I frowned. But he retired 2 years ago. They bought him out. Did they? Linda Hayes pulled the laptop toward her. Or did he tell you they bought him out? The implications crashed over me like a wave. He's still working. Not just working. Caroline pulled up another window. He's the primary shareholder. Look, R&P Engineering, Richard Morella Engineering. It's his company, Mom. He never sold it. He just removed you from the paperwork. My hands began to shake. I was a co-owner. We built that business together in the early years. I did the books, managed the office while he was in the field. According to these documents, you signed over your shares to him 3 years ago. Linda pointed at a scanned signature. Except that's not your signature. She was right. The loops were wrong, the pressure uneven. Someone had attempted to forge my handwriting, poorly. He's been embezzling from his own company, Kenneth said, his voice hollow. Taking money out, moving it offshore, while telling us he's retired and struggling financially. And using the cabin as leverage to get Emily to stay quiet about his other family. Caroline's face had gone ashen. This isn't just an affair and a secret child. This is systematic fraud, identity theft, forgery. Linda Hayes closed the laptop with deliberate care. Mrs. Morella, at this point, we're not just talking about family drama. We're talking about felonies, multiple felonies. If you want to pursue this legally, I do. Then you need to understand what that means. Your husband will likely face criminal charges, prison time, asset seizure, and it will all become public record. Your family will be in the media. Your grandchildren will hear about it at school. And if I don't pursue it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He gets away with it. Continues to manipulate. Maybe moves the money somewhere else. Possibly disappears entirely, leaving you responsible for the debts and liens he's created. Caroline's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and went pale. It's Dad. Don't answer, Kenneth said immediately, but she'd already swiped to accept. Hello? We all went silent, listening to the tinny sound of Richard's voice through the speaker, though we couldn't make out words. No, Dad, I can't meet you right now. Because it's 4 a.m. No, I'm at the cabin with Mom and Kenneth. Dad, just stop. Stop lying. We found the offshore account. We found everything. Silence on the other end. Then Richard's voice, clearer now as Caroline held the phone away from her ear. You don't understand. You don't know what you're dealing with. Emily is dangerous. She's been blackmailing me for months. Everything I've done has been to protect this family. By stealing from us? Caroline's voice cracked. By forging Mom's signature? By planning to give away our cabin? The cabin was already lost. I was trying to salvage something from the wreckage. Emily agreed to pay off the liens and walk away if I just gave her what she wanted. Acknowledgement, money, and the deed to one property. It was the best deal I could negotiate. You negotiated with a blackmailer using our inheritance as currency. Kenneth grabbed the phone from Caroline. Do you understand how insane that sounds? Kenneth, listen to me. Your mother has turned you against me. She doesn't understand the complexity. I understand perfectly. I took the phone, keeping my voice level despite the rage burning through me. You created a second family, abandoned them, and now that there are consequences, you're trying to paint everyone else as the villain. Carol is dying. Emily wants answers. And instead of being honest, you've spent decades lying and stealing. Helen, you self-righteous... He caught himself. You have no idea what it's like to make impossible choices, to try to protect everyone and satisfy no one. I did what I had to do. You did what was convenient. There's a difference. Tomorrow, when you meet Emily, you'll understand. She's not some innocent victim. She's calculated, manipulative. She's been planning this for years, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy me. Or maybe, I said softly, she's just a woman who wants to know why her father abandoned her. I'm not her father. The denial, after everything, was almost laughable. Then take a paternity test. Prove it. Silence. That's what I thought. I ended the call. Immediately, my phone began ringing. Richard calling me directly. I declined. He called again. Declined. Then texts began flooding in. You're making a mistake. Emily is using you. She'll destroy everything. I can fix this. If you just trust me, Helen. Please, I'm coming to the cabin. We need to talk face to face. Don't shut me out. The last text made my stomach drop. You have no idea what she's capable of. He's trying to scare you, Linda said, reading over my shoulder. Classic manipulation. Create fear. Position himself as protector. Maybe, but something in that last message felt different. Genuine fear rather than manipulation. Kenneth was staring at his own phone. He just sent me something. He turned the screen. An image. A photograph of Emily Whitmore, but not from a memorial page or social media. This was a mugshot. Younger, maybe 23 or 24. Dark circles under her eyes, defiant expression. The text beneath read, 5 years ago, arrested for extortion. Charges dropped, but look into it. She's done this before. Could be photoshopped, Caroline said, but her voice wavered. Linda Hayes was already typing on her laptop. I have access to criminal databases. Give me a few minutes. While she searched, I walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. Somewhere out there, Emily Whitmore was waiting, planning, and in just 8 hours, we'd be face to face. Found something, Linda said. Emily Whitmore, arrested in Billings 5 years ago. Charged with attempted extortion of a married businessman who claimed to be her biological father. Charges were dropped when the alleged victim refused to testify. Case sealed. My heart sank. So Richard might be telling the truth about her being dangerous. Or, Kenneth countered, a young woman tried to get acknowledgement from a man who abandoned her, and he used his resources to paint her as a criminal. Both scenarios were possible. Both painted a picture of desperation and dysfunction. Caroline's phone buzzed. She read the message and her face went white. It's from Emily. She says if we don't show up at noon, she's filing a lawsuit against Dad for fraud, against Mom for knowing about the offshore accounts, and against Kenneth and me for benefiting from stolen funds. She can't do that, I said. I didn't know about the accounts. You didn't benefit. Doesn't matter if it's true, Linda interrupted. Filing a lawsuit creates public record. Even if it's dismissed, the allegations would be out there. Searchable. Permanent damage to all of your reputations. So we're trapped, Kenneth said. We have to meet with her. Or we go to the prosecutor first, Linda suggested. File a complaint against your father. Get ahead of Emily's narrative. Which destroys Dad, Caroline said quietly. We all looked at each other, the weight of the decision settling over us. My phone rang, an unknown local number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mrs. Morella? A woman's voice, professional but urgent. This is Carol Whitmore. My breath caught. Not Emily, Carol herself. I don't have much time, she continued, her voice weak. I'm calling from Peaceful Meadows. I wanted to reach you before you meet my daughter tomorrow. How did you get this number? From Richard's phone, when he visited last week. A pause. Labored breathing. Mrs. Morella, I need you to understand something. Emily isn't trying to destroy your family. She's trying to save mine. I don't understand. The money Richard has been sending, it's not just for my treatment. It's restitution. For 28 years of child support he never paid. For the life Emily could have had if he'd acknowledged her. He owes her, legally and morally. But the offshore account, the stolen money, I don't know anything about offshore accounts. Richard told Emily he was broke, that he'd lost everything in bad investments. Emily found evidence that was a lie. That's when she started digging. That's when she found you. The pieces rearranged themselves into a new, more complex picture. Carol? Is Emily his daughter? A long silence. I don't know, not for certain, but I've always believed she was. She has his eyes, his stubbornness, his intelligence. Her voice broke. And she deserves better than a father who pretends she doesn't exist. Then why the extortion charge? Why threaten lawsuits? Because polite requests got her nowhere. She tried for years to contact him. Letters, emails, calls, all ignored. So she hired a private investigator, found the financial irregularities, the offshore money, the forged documents, and she decided if he wouldn't be a father, he'd at least face consequences. That's still blackmail. No. Carol's voice hardened despite its weakness. It's justice. There's a difference. Someone spoke in the background, a nurse telling Carol she needed to rest. I'm dying, Mrs. Morella. Weeks, maybe days. I need to know my daughter won't be alone in this world. I need to know she'll have family, even if that family doesn't want her. Carol, tomorrow at noon, please. Listen to her story. Look at her. Really look at her. And then decide if she's the villain Richard has painted her to be. The line went dead. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, as the sun rose fully over the mountains. Behind me, my children and the lawyer waited for an explanation. Change of plans, I said. We're not going into this meeting as adversaries. We're going in with open minds. Mom, she threatened us, Caroline protested. Because she's desperate. Because she's watching her mother die and her father continues to deny her existence. I turned to face them. I know what it's like to be lied to be manipulated, to have your reality questioned. If Emily is Richard's daughter, she's lived that her entire life. Kenneth nodded slowly. So what do? We listen, we verify, and we decide as a family that might be bigger than we thought. What happens next? Linda Hayes closed her briefcase. For the record, this is the riskiest approach you could take. Noted. And if she is planning to harm you, legally or otherwise, you're walking straight into her trap. Also noted. The attorney studied me for a long moment, then smiled slightly. You know, Mrs. Morella, I think I've underestimated you. Most people do. It's how I've survived this long. As the sun climbed higher, we prepared for the confrontation ahead. But even as we gathered documents and rehearsed questions, one thought kept circling in my mind. What if Emily wasn't the threat? What if the real danger had been living beside me for 35 years, wearing my husband's face, and I'd been too trusting to see it? At 11:45, my phone buzzed one last time. Richard, I'm outside the diner. I'm coming in with you whether you like it or not. That woman has destroyed enough. It ends today. I showed the text to the others. Well, Kenneth said, this should be interesting. Interesting. That was one word for it. The drive to Missoula felt both endless and too short. When we pulled into the Evergreen Diner parking lot at 5 minutes to noon, Richard's truck was already there. And sitting in the window booth, watching us arrive with an unreadable expression, was a young woman who had Richard's eyes, his jawline, his serious expression. Emily Whitmore, my possible stepdaughter, Richard's possible daughter, and the person who held all our futures in her hands. The Evergreen Diner smelled of coffee and bacon grease. Under different circumstances, it would have been comforting. Instead, it felt like walking into an ambush. Emily Whitmore stood as we entered. She was taller than I'd expected, her posture rigid with tension. Up close, the resemblance to Richard was undeniable. The same intense brown eyes, the high cheekbones, even the way she held her chin when defensive. Richard was already seated across from her, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. When he saw us, he half rose from his seat. Helen, you don't need to do this. Let me handle— Sit down, Richard. My voice carried more authority than I'd known I possessed. You've handled enough. Emily's gaze moved from Richard to me, assessing. Mrs. Morella, thank you for coming. These are my children, Caroline and Kenneth, and our attorney, Linda Hayes. Something flickered across Emily's face at the word attorney. Not quite fear, but wariness. I didn't realize this was going to be so formal. Neither did I, until I discovered the full extent of what's been happening. I slid into the booth across from her. The others arranged themselves around us. Caroline and Kenneth flanking me, Linda at the end, Richard isolated at the opposite side. A waitress approached, but I waved her off. We need privacy. Whatever we order, add 30% to the tip and give us the back booth undisturbed for an hour. The waitress, reading the tension, simply nodded and disappeared. Emily folded her hands on the table. I suppose you want answers. I want the truth, I corrected. From everyone. Starting with you. Me? Her eyebrows rose. Shouldn't he go first? He's the one who's been lying for 3 decades. We'll get to him. But you've been threatening my family, Ms. Whitmore. I'd like to understand why. Emily's jaw tightened. Because polite requests got me nowhere. Because I spent my entire childhood wondering why my father didn't want me. Because my mother is dying and she deserves peace, which means I deserve answers. The extortion charge from 5 years ago? Linda interjected. Want to explain that? I was 23 and stupid. I thought if I could prove my father was hiding assets, I could force him to acknowledge me. I hired a lawyer, threatened to expose him if he didn't take a paternity test. He had me arrested instead. Emily's gaze locked on Richard. Told police I was a disturbed young woman with delusions. The charges were dropped because he refused to testify, didn't want scrutiny on his finances. But the damage was done. I had a record. He had his silence. Richard leaned forward. You tried to ruin my life. You ruined mine first. Emily's voice cracked. I was 5 years old when you stopped coming around. 5. Do you have any idea what it's like to watch other kids with their fathers and wonder what you did wrong? To have your mother work 3 jobs because child support never came? I sent money, Richard protested weakly. For 2 years. Then it stopped. Right around the time you moved to Montana permanently with your real family. That's not... I have the canceled checks, Richard. All 24 of them. 2 years of minimal support, then nothing for 26 years. Until Mom got sick. The confirmation hung in the air. Richard didn't deny it. Caroline's voice was quiet but sharp. Dad, is she telling the truth? He wouldn't meet her eyes. It's complicated. No, I said. It's actually quite simple. You abandoned your responsibilities. You lied to everyone. Carol, Emily, me, our children. You built an entire alternate reality and expected it to hold forever. I was protecting you. Richard's facade cracked. Protecting our family from scandal, from pain, from consequences, Emily finished. That's all you've ever cared about. Not people, not relationships, just avoiding consequences. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were printouts of everything we'd found. Bank statements, emails, forged documents, the offshore account details. I spread them across the table like a dealer showing cards. Before we go any further, everyone needs to see what Richard has actually been doing. Richard's face went ashen. Helen, don't. He's been systematically embezzling from his own company. He forged my signature to remove me as co-owner. He took out a fraudulent second mortgage on our family cabin using our children's identities. He's hidden nearly $250,000 offshore, and he's been planning to give Emily our cabin, not out of generosity, but as a bribe to keep her quiet. Caroline gasped. Kenneth's hands clenched into fists, but it was Emily's reaction that surprised me. She looked genuinely shocked. He was going to give me the cabin? She stared at Richard. You told me you'd lost it, that there was nothing left to give me except acknowledgement. That was the plan, Richard said desperately. Give you the cabin, clear the liens with the offshore money, tell Helen we'd lost it to foreclosure. And I'd be the villain, Emily finished. The evil daughter who destroyed your family's legacy. She laughed bitterly. You were going to make me the bad guy even in your generosity. Linda Hayes leaned forward. Ms. Whitmore, were you aware of the embezzlement? The offshore accounts? No, I knew he had money. My investigator found discrepancies. But I thought it was hidden marital assets, maybe some savings, not systematic fraud. And the lawsuit threat? Linda pressed. The one you sent last night? Emily had the grace to look embarrassed. A bluff. I don't have the resources for a lawsuit. I was hoping fear would bring everyone to the table, force a conversation that Richard has avoided for 28 years. It worked, Kenneth said. Here we are. Now what? Now, I said, pulling out another folder, this one thicker, more official looking. We discuss the actual situation, not Richard's version, not Emily's assumptions. The truth. I'd spent the hours before dawn doing more than just documenting Richard's crimes. I'd made calls, sent emails, pulled in favors from my old paralegal network. The folder contained their responses. First, the paternity question. I placed a document in front of Emily. I contacted 3 DNA testing services. They've all agreed to rush processing. Richard, you have 2 choices. Take the test voluntarily, or Emily files a court-ordered petition. Either way, we'll have answers within a week. Richard's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Second, the cabin. I placed another document on the table. I contacted the bank this morning. They've agreed to freeze the foreclosure proceedings for 30 days while we sort out the fraudulent mortgage. I also filed a police report regarding the forged signatures. The investigation is now official. Mom, Caroline whispered, you called the police on Dad? I called them about a crime. The perpetrator happens to be your father. I kept my gaze on Richard. Did you really think I'd let you steal from our children? From me? That I'd just accept your narrative and move on? I was trying to fix it, he said weakly. By committing more crimes? By manipulating Emily into taking the blame for your failures? I shook my head. No, that ends now. I turned to Emily. Third, the restitution question. If the paternity test confirms you're Richard's daughter, Montana law allows you to pursue back child support. Given 26 years of non-payment, that could be substantial. However, I held up a hand as she started to speak. There are complications, the statute of limitations, the difficulty in calculating amounts, the legal fees involved. It would be a years-long battle that might yield very little. Emily's shoulders slumped. So he gets away with it. I didn't say that. I placed a third document on the table. I'm proposing an alternative. The cabin is worth approximately $400,000, even with the liens. If the paternity test confirms you're Richard's daughter, I'll sign over my half to you. Not as a bribe, as inheritance. What you should have received all along. The table erupted. Mom, no. Caroline's voice rose. That's our inheritance. You can't just give away our family legacy, Kenneth added. Richard looked like he might have a heart attack. Helen, you've lost your mind. Quiet. The word cracked like a whip. Everyone froze. I'm not finished. I pulled out the final document. If Emily is Richard's daughter, then Caroline and Kenneth, you have a sister. She's not stealing from you. She's claiming what was always rightfully hers. The cabin can be sold, or Emily can buy out your shares. Either way, she gets what Richard denied her. Family, acknowledgement, and a piece of her inheritance. And what about you? Emily asked quietly. You're giving up your share? I never cared about the cabin itself. I cared about what it represented. Family, tradition, belonging. But I won't protect those things with lies. I looked at Richard. Unlike some people, Linda Hayes was studying me with newfound respect. Mrs. Morella, I have to say, this is remarkably generous given the circumstances. It's not generosity, it's justice. I turned back to Emily. But there are conditions. You drop any threats against Caroline and Kenneth. They had nothing to do with their father's crimes. You work with them to determine the cabin's future, together, as siblings if the test confirms it. And you let me meet your mother before she passes. Emily's eyes filled with tears. You want to meet my mother. Carol deserves to hear an apology. From me for not knowing. For not stopping this sooner. For every year she struggled alone because my husband is a coward. Richard stood abruptly. I won't let you do this. The cabin is joint property. You need my signature. Actually, Linda interjected smoothly, given the ongoing fraud investigation and the forged documents, a judge could grant Mrs. Morella sole authority over marital assets, especially if you're facing criminal charges. Criminal charges? Richard's voice was hoarse. Fraud, forgery, identity theft, embezzlement. The list is growing. Linda's smile was cold. You didn't think there wouldn't be consequences, did you? I stood facing my husband across the table. 35 years of marriage, and in this moment, I saw him clearly for the first time. Not the man I'd thought he was, but the man he'd always been. Selfish, manipulative, willing to sacrifice anyone for his own comfort. Richard, here's what's going to happen. You're going to take the paternity test. You're going to cooperate fully with the police investigation. You're going to sign whatever documents are necessary to make restitution to Emily. And you're going to stay away from me until I decide whether our marriage survives this. You're my wife. I was your accomplice, your cover story, the acceptable face you showed the world while you lived a secret life. I picked up my bag. Not anymore. Emily stood as well, wiping her eyes. Mrs. Morella, I don't know what to say. Say you'll take care of the cabin if it becomes yours. Say you'll give your mother peace. Say you'll try to build something with Caroline and Kenneth instead of destroying each other over Richard's mistakes. I can do that. She extended her hand. I took it, feeling the calluses, working hands, like mine used to be before I'd let comfort make me soft. Then we have an agreement. Richard was shaking his head. This is insane. You're all insane. That woman is manipulating you. No, Dad. Caroline's voice cut through his protests. You're the one who's been manipulating everyone. For decades. It's over. Kenneth nodded. If Emily is our sister, she deserves better than what you gave her. Better than what you're still trying to do. Richard looked around the table, at his legitimate children siding with his illegitimate daughter, at his wife standing with the woman he'd tried to erase, at the lawyer documenting everything for the legal battles ahead, and finally, he seemed to understand that he'd lost. Fine. His voice was dead. I'll take the test. I'll cooperate. But don't expect me to play happy families with her. We don't expect anything from you anymore, I said. That's the point. He left without another word, stumbling out of the diner like a man in shock. In the silence that followed, Emily sank back into the booth. Thank you. I've spent so long being angry, I don't know how to feel now. Feel whatever you need to feel, I said gently. But know that whatever happens with the test, whatever happens with the cabin, you're not alone anymore. We're going to figure this out together. Caroline reached across the table tentatively. If you are our sister, I'd like to get to know you. The real you, not the threatening stranger from the texts. Same, Kenneth added. Though you scared the daylights out of us. Emily laughed, a surprised sound. That was kind of the point. Sorry. Linda Hayes gathered her papers. I'll start the paperwork. Mrs. Morella, you understand this is going to be complicated? Everything worth doing is. As we left the diner, stepping into the bright Montana afternoon, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Free. Free from lies, from secrets, from the exhausting work of maintaining a facade. Whatever came next, legal battles, family reconstruction, painful revelations, I'd face it with clear eyes and honest words. Richard had spent 35 years building walls with his lies. I was going to spend however much time I had left tearing them down. One truth at a time. The paternity test results arrived 6 days later. I was at the cabin, alone for the first time since everything had unraveled. Caroline and Kenneth had returned to their lives with promises to come back soon. Linda Hayes was handling the legal maze. Richard was living in a motel in town, awaiting the prosecutor's decision on charges. And I was packing. Not everything, just the things that mattered. Photo albums from before the lies, my grandmother's quilt, the cast iron skillet I'd used to make breakfast for 3 generations of children. My phone rang. Linda Hayes. The results are in, she said without preamble. Emily Whitmore is definitively Richard's biological daughter. 99.9% certainty. I sank into a chair, even though I'd known this was coming. Knowing and having confirmation were different things. How is she? I asked. Surprisingly calm. I think part of her always knew. But having proof is significant. Linda paused. She wants to see you. Says she has something to tell you before her mother passes. Carol's been moved to hospice. The doctors say days. Maybe a week. I'll go today. Helen, there's something else. The prosecutor reviewed the evidence. Richard's being charged with forgery and fraud. The embezzlement case is more complex. It was his own company, but they're building a case. He's looking at 3 to 5 years, possibly more if he doesn't cooperate. 3 to 5 years? My husband in prison. The thought should have devastated me. Instead, I felt only a distant sadness, like mourning someone who died long ago. And the cabin? The bank agreed to your proposal. Once the lien is cleared and the fraudulent mortgage resolved, you can transfer your half to Emily. Caroline and Kenneth can decide whether to sell their portions to her or maintain shared ownership. It'll take months to sort out, but the legal framework is there. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet cabin, listening to the wind in the pines. 35 years of marriage, ending not with passion or tragedy, but with paperwork and legal proceedings. Maybe that was fitting. Peaceful Meadows Care Center was nothing like I'd imagined. Instead of sterile and depressing, it was filled with light. Windows overlooking mountains, comfortable furniture, soft colors. Still, the antiseptic smell underneath the lavender air freshener reminded me why people came here. To say goodbye. Emily met me in the lobby. She looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed from crying and sleepless nights. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "Mom's been asking for you." "How is she?" "Lucid today." "That's good. Yesterday she was mostly sleeping." Emily led me down a hallway lined with photographs, residents smiling with families, celebrating birthdays, living despite dying. "Mrs. Morella, I need to apologize. For the threats, for dragging your children into this. I was angry and desperate and Emily." I stopped walking, turned to face her. "You were a daughter fighting for acknowledgement. You don't need to apologize for that." Her eyes filled with tears. I kept telling myself I just wanted the truth, but part of me wanted revenge too, wanted him to hurt like I'd been hurting. That's human. It's also understandable. I touched her arm gently. "But now you have a choice. You can let that anger define the rest of your life, or you can build something new. With your siblings. With me, if you'll have me as whatever I am to you." "Stepmother?" She tested the word. "Is that what you'd be?" "If Richard and I divorce, technically no. But biology isn't the only thing that makes family." I smiled sadly. "I'm learning that the hard way." She led me to room 247. Carol Whitmore lay in a bed surrounded by flowers. So many flowers the room looked like a garden. She was smaller than I'd expected, diminished by illness, but her eyes were alert when we entered. "Helen Morella," she said, her voice papery thin, "the woman whose life I complicated." "Carol Whitmore," I replied, sitting in the chair beside her bed. "The woman whose life my husband destroyed." She laughed, which turned into a cough. Emily helped her sip water. When she recovered, Carol studied me with those kind eyes I'd seen in the memorial photo. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Something I should have told Richard 30 years ago, but I was too proud, too angry." Emily looked confused. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Carol's gaze stayed on me. "I knew he was married. From the beginning. I knew, and I pursued him anyway." The confession hung in the air. "He was lonely, or so he said, traveling all the time, away from his family. I was a secretary at the firm he was consulting with. Young, stupid, believing that love conquered everything." She closed her eyes. "I thought I could make him leave you. I got pregnant thinking it would force his hand. Instead, it made him run." "Mom," Emily's voice broke. "I lied to you, honey. Told you he'd abandoned us out of cruelty. But the truth is more complicated. He was a coward, yes. But I was a willing participant in my own heartbreak." Carol opened her eyes again, focusing on me. "I'm sorry. For my part in this. For the years of silence that hurt your family too." I took her hand. Thin, cold, the skin like tissue paper. "Carol, he was the married one. The responsibility was his. But I knew better. I just didn't care. Not until Emily was born and I realized what I'd done. Brought a child into a situation with no good outcome." Tears slipped down her temples. "I've spent 28 years trying to make it right. But you can't build a stable life on a foundation of lies. You, of all people, understand that now." I did. "Oh, I did." "Emily deserves better than we gave her," Carol continued. "Both of us, me and Richard. She deserves a family that isn't built on secrets and shame. That's why I pushed her to find him, why I encouraged her to fight, Not for money, for belonging. Emily was crying openly now. Mom, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Because I don't have much time, and these things need to be said. Carol squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Take care of her, please. She's prickly and stubborn and sometimes too smart for her own good, but she's also kind and loyal and deserving of love. Be the mother I couldn't be. Give her the family I couldn't provide. I will, I promised. I already am. Carol smiled. Good. That's good. Her eyes drifted closed. Richard was never worth either of us, you know. We wasted so much time on such a small man. The observation was so accurate, so cutting, that I couldn't help but laugh. Carol joined in, a wheezing sound that was more alive than anything else in that room. When visiting hours ended, Emily walked me to my car. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting everything gold. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait. For legal proceedings. For your mother's peace. For Richard to face consequences. I unlocked my car but didn't get in. And we start building something new. You, me, Caroline, and Kenneth. If you want that. I do. She hesitated. Can I ask you something? How are you so calm about all this? Your husband betrayed you. Your marriage is ending. Your life is falling apart. But you seem... okay. I considered the question. How was I okay? Because I spent 35 years being who Richard needed me to be. The supportive wife. The understanding partner. The woman who asked no questions and accepted his version of reality. And I was miserable without even realizing it. And now? Now I'm free. To be angry. To make my own choices. To build a life that's mine. That's not falling apart, Emily. That's finally coming together. She hugged me then. Sudden, fierce. The embrace of someone starved for maternal affection. I held her, this stranger who was family, this daughter I'd never expected. When we separated, she was smiling through tears. I'll call you, when it's time. For Mom. I'll be there. Carol passed 3 days later, in the early morning, with Emily at her bedside. I arrived an hour after, bringing coffee and quiet company. We sat together, this daughter I'd inherited, and I, not talking, just being present in grief. The funeral was small. A few friends from the care center, a couple of distant cousins. Caroline and Kenneth came, standing awkwardly until Emily invited them to sit with us in the family section. Richard didn't come. He sent flowers, expensive, impersonal, and a card that said only, "My condolences." Even in death, he couldn't acknowledge what he'd lost. After the service, the four of us, Emily, Caroline, Kenneth, and I, stood by Carol's grave as workers began filling it in. She would have liked this, Emily said. All of us together. Finally. She would have preferred we got here 30 years earlier, Kenneth replied. But his voice was gentle. We can't change the past, Caroline said. But we can change what comes next. Speaking of which, Emily said, pulling out a folder, I've been thinking about the cabin. I don't want to take it from you, any of you. It's your history, your memories. But I'd like to be part of it. Part of those memories going forward. What are you suggesting? I asked. What if we keep it? All of us. Shared ownership. We create new traditions. New memories. The Morella family cabin, but bigger than it was before. Including everyone who belongs. Kenneth and Caroline exchanged glances. Some silent sibling communication passed between them, then expanded to include Emily. Tentative, new, but real. I think that could work, Caroline said slowly. If we set clear rules about scheduling, maintenance, costs. We will, Emily assured her. I'm not trying to steal anything. I'm trying to belong for the first time. Then you belong, Kenneth said firmly. Welcome to the family, sister. The word, sister, hung in the air like a blessing. 6 months later, I stood on the cabin porch, watching summer dawn break over the mountains. Inside, 3 of my children slept. Caroline and her family in one room, Kenneth and his in another, Emily in the small guest room that we'd agreed would be permanently hers. Richard's trial had concluded last week. 3 years, with possibility of parole in 18 months. He'd accepted a plea deal, admitting guilt in exchange for a lighter sentence. I'd attended the sentencing, sitting in the back of the courtroom, and felt nothing but a distant sadness. The man I'd married had maybe never existed, or perhaps he had, once, before cowardice and convenience had eroded him into someone unrecognizable. I'd filed for divorce the day after his sentencing. In a year, I'd be Helen Morella in name only, or maybe I'd take back my maiden name. Start fresh, begin again at 63. The cabin door opened. Emily emerged, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, handing me one. "Too much to think about. Good thoughts or bad thoughts?" "Both. Mostly good." I sipped the coffee. Strong, the way I liked it. "Your mother would be proud of you, you know. How you've handled all this. I keep thinking she'd be happier if I'd handled it better from the start. If I hadn't been so angry, so aggressive. Your anger was justified. You just needed to aim it at the right target." Richard, I agreed. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher. Inside, I heard children's voices. My grandchildren, waking up, beginning their day. "Emily," I said, "thank you." "For what?" "For being stubborn. For refusing to accept Richard's lies. For forcing all of us to face the truth." I turned to look at her. "If you hadn't pushed, I might have lived the rest of my life in willful ignorance. Comfortable and completely hollow. You would have figured it out eventually." "You're too smart not to." "Maybe. But you accelerated the timeline. Saved me years of wasted life." She smiled. Richard's smile, but warmer, more genuine. "Then I guess we saved each other." The door burst open. Caroline's twins ran out onto the porch, followed by Kenneth's daughter. They swarmed Emily, begging her to take them fishing like she'd promised yesterday. "After breakfast," she told them, laughing. "And only if your parents say it's okay." They raced back inside to negotiate. Emily followed, calling back to me. "You coming?" "In a minute." I stayed on the porch, listening to the sounds of family. Laughter, playful arguing, the clatter of dishes as breakfast preparations began. This cabin, which had almost been lost to Richard's lies and desperation, was alive again, renewed, transformed from a symbol of tradition into something better, a space where truth lived, where family meant more than biology, where the past's mistakes became lessons rather than prisons. At 63, I'd learned what took most people a lifetime to understand. Wisdom wasn't about avoiding pain or preventing betrayal. It was about surviving both and choosing, deliberately and consciously, to build something better from the wreckage. Richard had spent 35 years constructing elaborate lies. I'd spent 6 months building something more enduring, a family forged not in deception, but in difficult, painful, liberating truth. And standing there, in the morning light, surrounded by the sound of children and coffee and new beginnings, I understood something profound. I'd won, not through revenge or bitterness, not through legal victories or financial settlements, but through the quiet, steady triumph of choosing honesty over comfort, of embracing complexity over convenient fiction, of building bridges instead of walls. Richard was in prison, but I was finally, truly free. And freedom, I'd discovered, was worth every moment of the painful journey it took to find it. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.